The Virginia sun beat down mercilessly on the Joint Special Operations Training Facility as Commander Jake Castellano wiped sweat from his brow. He'd seen countless shooters over his 15-year career with SEAL Team 3, cocky Rangers, stone-faced Delta operators, even CIA paramilitaries. But the woman now approaching the firing line didn't fit any mold he recognized. Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years in the field. No wasted energy, no unnecessary movements. Her desert tan uniform was faded from multiple deployments, and her boots showed the scars of hard miles. Jake noticed his SEAL teammates watching her with barely concealed skepticism. Women had only recently been allowed in combat roles, and old attitudes died hard. "Think she can even lift that Barrett?" whispered Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Jake's second-in-command. Jake didn't answer, but he shared the doubt. The Barrett M82A 1.50 caliber sniper rifle was a beast, 30 pounds of steel and fury that could punch through engine blocks at a mile. The recoil alone had bruised ribs on experienced shooters. Maya reached the firing line and began her pre-shot routine. Jake watched through narrowed eyes as she checked the rifle with practiced efficiency, her movements precise and confident. She dropped into position behind the weapon, and something in her posture made Jake lean forward. This wasn't the stance they taught in basic sniper school. Her body alignment was different, unconventional, but somehow perfect. The range officer's voice crackled. "Target is at 1,500 meters. Wind from the east at 12 knots, gusting to 15. 5 shots for qualification. You may commence firing when ready." 1,500 meters, nearly a mile. Most shooters struggled to maintain accuracy at that distance, even with perfect conditions. The wind made it exponentially harder. Maya settled in, her breathing becoming rhythmic and controlled. Jake had seen this before, the shooter's zen state where everything else disappeared, but there was something different about her stillness. It was absolute, almost supernatural. The Barrett roared like thunder. Through his binoculars, Jake tracked the vapor trail across the shimmering heat waves. The bullet struck dead center of the target, a perfect hit. "Lucky shot," Marcus muttered. But Maya was already adjusting, her fingers making micro-corrections to the scope. The second shot followed within 15 seconds. Another center hit, then a third, fourth, fifth. Jake's hands tightened on the binoculars. This wasn't luck. Through the magnified view, he could see something that made his stomach drop. All 5 shots had created one ragged hole in the target center. At 1,500 meters, in gusty wind conditions, she'd essentially put 5 bullets through the same point. That's not possible," Marcus breathed beside him. The range fell silent. Even the most experienced shooters present knew they'd witnessed something extraordinary. Maya stood, cleared the weapon, and stepped back from the line as casually as if she'd been plinking cans in her backyard. Jake felt his professional pride prickle. He was a decorated SEAL commander, a veteran of multiple combat deployments. He'd trained with the best shooters in the world, and this staff sergeant, this woman he'd never heard of, had just performed what should be impossible. He strode toward her, his jaw set. Several of his teammates followed, curiosity overcoming their skepticism. "Staff Sergeant Reeves," Jake said, his tone sharper than intended. "That was quite a display. Lucky wind conditions today." Maya turned to face him, and Jake found himself looking into eyes that had seen things, hard things. They were the color of granite and just as unyielding. She didn't smile, didn't bristle at his obvious dismissiveness. She simply held his gaze with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. "Luck had nothing to do with it, Commander," she said, her voice carrying a Montana drawl. "The wind was actually working against me. I just know how to read it." The unspoken challenge hung in the air between them. Jake couldn't sleep. He tossed in his quarters at the training facility, replaying that impossible grouping in his mind. 5 shots, 1 hole, 1,500 meters. The mathematics alone defied logic. Wind drift at that distance should have scattered the rounds across several inches, even for a world-class shooter. Yet Maya Reeves had made it look routine. At 200 hours, he gave up on sleep and headed to his office. The base was quiet, just the hum of generators and the distant bark of a security dog. Jake pulled up the classified personnel database and typed in Maya's name. Her file appeared on screen, but something was immediately wrong. Where there should have been detailed deployment records, unit assignments, and operational history, there were only black bars, redaction after redaction. Entire pages looked like censored government documents from a conspiracy thriller. "What the hell?" Jake muttered, scrolling through the fragments. "Born in Kalispell, Montana. enlisted at 18, attended Army sniper school, then nothing but redacted blocks for the next 7 years, no unit assignments visible, no operations listed, just security clearance levels that made Jake's eyebrows rise. She had access codes higher than most field-grade officers. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 2 years. Master Sergeant Dave Chen answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. "This better be life or death, Castellano. Maya Reeves, you know her." The silence on the other end stretched so long Jake thought the connection had dropped. When Dave finally spoke, his voice had changed completely, alert, careful, almost reverent. "Where did you hear that name?" "She's instructing at the joint facility. Dave, what am I not seeing in her file?" Another pause. Jake heard movement, a door closing. When Dave spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Jake, you need to leave this alone." "I can't do that. I need to know who I'm working with." Dave sighed, the sound heavy with memories. "I was Delta, operating in Afghanistan. October 2019, Hindu Kush Mountains. We were running reconnaissance on a Taliban commander when everything went sideways. They knew we were coming, set up a coordinated ambush from multiple positions." Jake leaned forward, his heart rate picking up. "We were pinned down, 12 operators about to be overrun. Our air support was 20 minutes out. We had maybe 5 minutes before they flanked us and finished the job. Then our radio crackled, Army sniper team on overwatch, grid coordinates we didn't even know were occupied." Maya, Jake breathed. She was spotting for herself. Her spotter had been medevaced 2 days prior with appendicitis. The Taliban commander was directing the ambush from a ridgeline across the valley. "I'm talking about a distance that shouldn't matter in combat because nobody can make that shot." Dave's voice grew intense. 3,247 meters, Jake, over 2 miles, thin mountain air, wind swirling through 3 different valleys, temperature gradients, extreme elevation changes. Jake felt the room tilt. He made shots at 1,200 meters in combat. That was considered exceptional. What Dave was describing was beyond legendary. She calculated everything in under 30 seconds. I heard her breathing over the radio, slow, controlled, like she had all the time in the world. Then one shot. We watched through our optics. The bullet flew for what felt like forever, 4 full seconds of flight time, and then Dave's voice cracked slightly. "Target down." The ambush collapsed immediately. 12 of us walked out of those mountains because of one woman and one impossible bullet. "Why isn't this in her record?" Jake demanded. The operation was black. Officially, we were never there. The Taliban commander officially died from an internal dispute. Maya's shot, the longest confirmed kill in modern warfare, doesn't exist on paper. She saved 12 American lives, and nobody outside a handful of people will ever know. Jake sat in stunned silence, shame burning in his chest. He dismissed her, questioned her, assumed she was just another instructor riding a desk. "Jake," Dave said quietly, "don't underestimate Maya Reeves. She's not just a good shooter. She's the best I've ever seen, and I've worked with them all." Jake arrived at the range before dawn, coffee in hand, determined to see Maya Reeves differently. She was already there, of course, methodically cleaning a rifle with the kind of attention most people reserved for surgery. The early morning mist clung to the valley, and in the half-light she looked almost ghostly. "You're up early, Commander," she said without looking up. "Couldn't sleep." Jake hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I made some calls last night about you." Maya's hands stilled on the cleaning rod, her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And now you want to know if the stories are true." "I want to understand who I'm working with." She resumed cleaning, each stroke deliberate and controlled. "I grew up in Kalispell, Montana, middle of nowhere. My father, Thomas Reeves, was a competitive shooting champion, won the national long-range championship 3 times. He put a rifle in my hands when I was 6 years old." Jake sat on the bench beside her, listening. "By the time I was 12, I was out hooting grown men at state competitions. They'd laugh when I signed up, this skinny girl with braids showing up with a custom rifle almost as tall as she was. Then I'd beat them and the laughter stopped. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. My father used to say, 'Maya, a bullet doesn't care about gender. Physics doesn't discriminate. Only people do.'" "Sounds like a smart man." "He was. Lung cancer took him when I was 17. Month after his funeral, I enlisted. Figured I'd honor his memory by being the best shooter the Army had ever seen." The smile faded. "I had no idea what I was signing up for." She set down the cleaning rod and finally met his eyes. Basic training was easy. Advanced individual training was manageable. But when I applied for sniper school, that's when the real fight began. Jake had heard rumors about the old guard's resistance to women in combat specialties, but he'd never heard it from someone who'd lived through it. My first application was rejected, no reason given. Second application, same thing. Third time I threatened to go to Congress. They finally let me attend, but they didn't want me to succeed. Her voice remained steady, but Jake could hear the steel underneath. Extra physical tests that weren't in the curriculum. Ruck marches that were mysteriously longer than what the men did. Equipment that accidentally malfunctioned during my evaluations. How did you handle it? I beat every standard they set. When they made me carry 50 pounds, I carried 70. When they extended my marches, I finished faster than anyone else. When my equipment failed, I improvised and adapted. She picked up the rifle again, her fingers tracing the worn stock. They wanted me to quit. Instead, I graduated top of my class with the highest marksmanship scores in the school's history. Jake felt a mix of admiration and shame. Admiration for her perseverance, shame for the system that had tried to break her. My first deployment, the team leader refused to take me on missions, said I was a liability. I spent 3 months pulling guard duty and running errands while the unit ran operations. Her knuckles whitened slightly on the rifle. Then one day, their primary sniper took shrapnel. They had a high-value target, a narrow window, and no choice but to use me. What happened? I made the shot, 847 meters, urban environment, multiple wind variables. 1 shot, 1 kill, mission success. She looked at him directly. After that, I became their go-to shooter. Turned out competence matters more than chromosomes when bullets are flying. The sun was rising now, burning off the mist. Other instructors began arriving for the day's training. Maya stood, shouldering her rifle case. Commander, I've spent my entire career proving myself. I'm tired of it, but I'll keep doing it because that's what pioneers do. We clear the path so the next generation doesn't have to fight as hard. She paused. Your teammate yesterday said my grouping was lucky. I've heard that word my whole life. Lucky shot, lucky qualification, lucky deployment. I don't need luck, Commander. I have skill. There's a difference. She walked away, leaving Jake with his coffee and a new understanding of what real courage looked like. 3 days into the training course, Jake found Maya alone on the observation deck after dinner. The sun was setting over the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She stood at the railing, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands, staring at something only she could see. Mind if I join you? Jake asked. Maya glanced at him, then nodded toward the empty space beside her. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the light fade from the peaks. Dave Chen sends his regards, Jake said quietly. He told me about Kunar province. Maya's expression didn't change, but her grip tightened on the cup. Dave talks too much. He said you saved his life and 11 others. I did my job. That shot was more than a job, Maya. That was, Jake struggled for words, that was legendary. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't respond. Then, as darkness settled over the mountains, she began to speak. October 23, 2019. We were operating in the Hindu Kush, providing overwatch for a Delta Force reconnaissance element tracking a high-value Taliban commander. The terrain was brutal, peaks over 13,000 feet, valleys so deep you could hide entire armies in them. Her voice took on a distant quality, as if she was back there. I'd been in position for 16 hours. My spotter, Corporal Jackson, had been medevaced 2 days earlier with a ruptured appendix. So it was just me, my rifle, and a radio. Jake remained silent, letting her tell it at her own pace. Around 1400 hours, Dave's team reported they'd located the target in a village across the valley. They were moving into position when everything went wrong. Taliban fighters materialized from 3 different positions. They'd been waiting, knew Delta was coming. It was a perfectly coordinated ambush. Maya set down her coffee cup, her hands beginning to move as she described the scene, as if she was calculating again. I heard the panic in Dave's voice over the radio. 12 operators pinned down, taking fire from multiple angles. Air support was 20 minutes out. In that terrain, in that situation, 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours. She turned to face Jake. The Taliban commander was directing everything from a ridgeline on the far side of the valley. I could see him through my scope, standing in the open, arrogant, watching his ambush unfold. How far? Jake asked, though he already knew. My rangefinder kept giving me error readings. The distance was beyond its maximum capability. I had to calculate manually using terrain features and map data. 3,247 meters over 2 miles. She shook her head slowly. At that distance in those conditions, it shouldn't be possible. Thin mountain air reduces bullet stability. Wind was gusting through 3 separate valleys, each creating different drift patterns. The elevation change alone was extreme. I was firing down at a steep angle, which affects trajectory calculations. But you took the shot anyway. I had 30 seconds to decide, 30 seconds to calculate bullet drop, wind drift, air density, temperature gradient, even the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation. My spotter wasn't there to confirm my math. It was just me and the numbers running through my head. Her voice grew softer. I radioed Dave, told him to keep his head down. He asked what I was planning. I said something stupid. Jake found himself holding his breath. I settled behind the Barrett, adjusted for every variable I could think of. My heart rate was 52 beats per minute, I counted. I took 3 breaths, let half of the third one out, and squeezed the trigger. Maya's eyes were distant, reliving the moment. The rifle kicked. The bullet left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second. At that range, there's a noticeable delay. You fire, and then you wait and wait. 4 seconds, Jake whispered. 4 seconds that felt like 4 hours. I watched through my scope as the bullet arced across that valley. Watched it drop, watched the wind push it. And then, she paused, her jaw working. The target dropped. The Taliban fighters saw their commander fall, and the entire ambush collapsed into chaos. Dave's team fought their way out. 12 men came home because of you. Maya turned back to the darkening mountains. 12 men came home, and I got a classified footnote in a file nobody will ever read. No medal ceremony, no recognition, just another redacted operation. Her voice cracked slightly, the first real emotion Jake had heard from her. My father used to say that the best shots are the ones nobody sees. I just never thought he meant it literally. Jake stood beside her as night claimed the valley, understanding now that some heroism happens in silence, witnessed only by mountains and the people it saves. The training course entered its 3rd week, and something fundamental had shifted between Jake and Maya. What began as professional respect evolved into something deeper, a recognition of kindred spirits forged in the same fires, carrying burdens only fellow warriors could understand. It started with small moments. Jake noticed Maya's hands trembling slightly before morning coffee, the telltale sign of nightmares that haunted her sleep. She observed how Jake positioned himself with his back to walls, always maintaining visual access to exits, the hypervigilance that never quite left combat veterans. Neither mentioned these observations, but an unspoken understanding grew between them. One evening, after a particularly grueling training day, they found themselves alone in the instructor's lounge. Rain hammered against the windows, and distant thunder rolled across the mountains. Jake was reviewing course materials when Maya's voice cut through the silence. "Do you ever dream about them?" Jake looked up. Maya stood at the window, her reflection ghostly in the rain-streaked glass. "The ones who didn't make it home?" he asked quietly. She nodded, not turning around. Jake set down his papers. Every night, Ramadi, 2016. We were clearing a compound when my point man, Petty Officer 2nd Class Marcus Rivera, triggered an IED. He was 23 years old, had a baby daughter he'd never met. His voice grew rough. I was supposed to be on point that day. He volunteered because I had a migraine. He died in my place. Maya finally turned, and Jake saw the understanding in her eyes, the recognition of shared guilt that logic couldn't erase. "Afghanistan 2018, she said, moving to sit across from him. I was providing overwatch for a patrol. Taliban fighters opened fire from a building complex. I had clear shots on multiple targets, but I had to prioritize limited ammunition, multiple threats. I chose wrong." She paused, her jaw clenching. "A 20-year-old private named Emily Torres died because I shot target A instead of target B. I replay that moment every single night, calculating different scenarios, different choices. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? I'm supposed to be the best, the one who doesn't miss, the one who makes the right calls." Her voice cracked slightly. "Every mission I carried the weight of knowing that one mistake wouldn't just cost lives, it would validate every doubt anyone ever had about women in combat. One missed shot, one wrong decision, and I'd prove every skeptic right." Jake leaned forward, recognizing the crushing pressure she'd operated under. "That's an impossible standard, Maya." "It was the only standard I was allowed." She met his eyes. "Do you know what it's like to be constantly scrutinized? To know that your male teammates' mistakes are seen as individual failures, but yours would be used as evidence against every woman who came after you?" The raw pain in her voice struck Jake hard. He thought about his own career, the automatic respect he'd received as a male SEAL, the benefit of the doubt, the brotherhood that welcomed him without question. "After Kunar province, after that shot, I thought things would change," Maya continued. "I thought I'd finally proven myself beyond doubt. But the very next operation, a new team leader questioned my presence, said he didn't feel comfortable having a woman on his team. I just made the longest confirmed kill in modern warfare, and he didn't feel comfortable." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, not at Maya, but at a system that had forced her to fight 2 wars simultaneously, one against the enemy and one against her own side. "I'm sorry," he said, "for my skepticism that first day, for every assumption I made." "You're not the first and you won't be the last," she offered a sad smile, but you're one of the few who admitted it, who chose to see the person instead of the gender. That matters more than you know." They sat in comfortable silence as the storm raged outside. Two warriors, different paths but similar scars, finding solace in shared understanding. "The nightmares don't stop, do they?" Maya asked finally. "No," Jake admitted, "but maybe carrying them together makes them a little lighter." She nodded slowly. "Maybe." Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating two people who'd spent their lives in darkness, finally finding someone who understood the weight of the shadows they carried. In that moment, forged not by fire but by mutual respect and hard-won trust, a true friendship was born, one that would soon be tested in ways neither could imagine. The briefing room doors burst open at 600 hours, shattering the morning routine. Colonel Richard Hayes, the facility commander, strode in with three men in civilian clothes. CIA, Jake recognized immediately. The easy atmosphere of the training course evaporated instantly. "Clear the room," Hayes barked. "Instructor, staff, and SEAL team leaders only." Within minutes the room was secured. A projector flickered to life, showing satellite imagery of a compound in northern Syria. Jake's pulse quickened. He knew that look, that urgency. This was operational. "Gentleman and lady," Hayes nodded curtly at Maya, "we have a situation. This is Zahir al-Rashid, known as the Engineer." A face appeared on screen, line-bearded, cold eyes that had seen too much death. He's responsible for orchestrating 17 attacks against U.S. and coalition forces over the past 2 years. Killed 127 people, including 43 Americans. The room went silent. Everyone knew that name, that face. Al-Rashid was a ghost, appearing and disappearing across Syria and Iraq, always one step ahead of capture or death. One of the CIA officers stepped forward. "Intelligence indicates he's planning something catastrophic. Multiple city targets, coordinated timing. We're talking hundreds, possibly thousands of casualties. We have a narrow window. He's at this compound for 72 hours maximum." Hayes pulled up tactical imagery. The problem is access. The compound sits in a valley surrounded by loyalist militia. Assault would require extensive air support, alerting every hostile in a 50-kilometer radius. By the time we breached, he'd be gone or dead by his own hand. We'd lose intelligence on the pending attacks. Jake studied the terrain, his tactical mind already working. Then he saw it, a ridgeline on the opposite side of the valley. "What's the distance from that ridge to the compound?" he asked. The CIA officer checked his notes. 3,100 meters, give or take. The room erupted in murmurs. That distance was beyond standard sniper operations, beyond what most would consider possible. "Commander Castellano," Hayes said, "you and your team are being tasked with this operation. Direct action insert, take the shot, exfil. 72 hours to plan and deploy." Jake stood, his mind already made up. "I need Staff Sergeant Reeves as primary shooter." The room fell silent. Colonel Hayes frowned. "Commander, we have SEAL snipers." "With all due respect, sir, none of them have made a shot beyond 2,000 meters in combat. Staff Sergeant Reeves has." Jake's voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. A Marine colonel Jake didn't recognize stood abruptly. "You want to bring a woman on a SEAL operation into hostile territory? This is insanity." "This is necessity," Jake shot back. "She's the most qualified shooter we have for extreme-range precision. The mission requires someone who can make an impossible shot. She's proven she can." "Her record is classified," another officer objected. "We can't verify." "I can verify it," Jake's voice cut like steel. "I've seen her shoot. I've confirmed her operational history. She's the best option we have, and frankly, she's the only option." Hayes leaned back, considering. "Commander, this is highly irregular, the optics alone." "Sir, with respect, I don't care about optics. I care about mission success and bringing my team home. Staff Sergeant Reeves gives us the best chance at both." Jake paused, then played his final card. "If she's not included, I'm requesting to be removed from mission command." The threat hung in the air. Hayes's jaw tightened. The CIA officers exchanged glances. After what felt like an eternity, Hayes nodded slowly. "Fine, Reeves is approved, but Commander, this is on you. Any complications, any failures." "Understood, sir." The briefing continued with logistics and intelligence updates, but Jake barely heard it. He caught Maya's eye across the room. She gave him the slightest nod, her expression unreadable but her eyes burning with determination. After the briefing, as others filed out, Maya approached him in the hallway. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Threaten your career for me." "I didn't do it for you," Jake replied. I did it for the mission. You're the best tool for the job." He paused, then added with a slight smile, "Besides, someone once told me that competence matters more than chromosomes when bullets are flying." Maya's lips quirked slightly. "Wise person." "The wisest." Jake's expression turned serious. "They'll be watching you, Maya, waiting for any excuse to say this was a mistake." She met his gaze, and Jake saw the same steel he'd witnessed that first day on the range. "Then they'll be disappointed, Commander. I don't miss when it matters." "I know that's why you're going." The Syrian mountain felt like the surface of Mars, barren, hostile, utterly unforgiving. Maya lay prone on the rocky ridgeline, the Barrett .50 caliber positioned on its bipod as the first light of dawn crept across the valley below. Sweat already beaded on her forehead despite the cool morning air. This wasn't Montana. This wasn't Afghanistan. This was different. Behind her, Jake and his six-man SEAL team maintained a defensive perimeter, weapons trained on potential approach routes. They'd infiltrated under cover of darkness, moving through 12 kilometers of hostile territory without detection. Now came the hard part, the waiting. "Target compound in sight," whispered Lieutenant Marcus Webb, manning the spotting scope beside Maya. "No movement yet." Maya's eye pressed against the scope, scanning the building complex 3,100 meters away. Through the powerful optics, she could see weathered stone walls, a courtyard, windows like dark eyes staring back at her. Somewhere inside those walls was Zahir al-Rashid, the man responsible for 127 deaths. "Wind's picking up," Marcus observed, checking his handheld Kestrel weather meter. 7 knots from the west, gusting to 12. But Maya was already feeling it. The desert wind was different from mountain wind, more chaotic, unpredictable, carrying heat that created mirage effects and distorted her view. She watched dust devils dance across the valley floor, each one telling a story about air currents and pressure changes. Hours crawled past, the sun climbed higher, turning the world into a furnace. Heat waves shimmered off the rocks, making the target compound waver like a reflection in disturbed water. Maya's ghillie suit trapped heat against her body, but she didn't move, didn't adjust. Movement meant detection, and detection meant mission failure. "Movement," Marcus breathed. "Second floor window, eastern side." Maya shifted her aim slightly. Through the scope, distorted by heat and distance, she saw a figure. Checking against the intelligence photos, comparing facial features visible even at this impossible range. "Confirmed," she whispered. "That's al-Rashid." Jake's voice came through her earpiece, steady and calm. "You have authorization. Window is yours." Maya's heart rate, which had been hovering around 50 beats per minute, dropped even lower. 48, 45. This was the state she needed, the zone where time slowed and the world shrank to mathematics and physics. She began her calculations. Distance 3,100 meters, elevation change 380 meters downward, temperature 38 degrees Celsius, barometric pressure 1,013 millibars, wind variable averaging 9 knots, Coriolis effect for this latitude and direction, 0.7 MOA right. But the heat mirage was the killer. At this temperature, light bent as it passed through air of different densities, making the target appear slightly displaced from its actual position. She had to aim not at what she saw, but at where physics told her the target actually was. "Wind changing," Marcus warned, 11 knots shifting northwest. Maya's fingers made microscopic adjustments to the scope. The target was moving inside the room, crossing toward the window. She had seconds, not minutes. Her breathing slowed, in, out, each breath controlled, measured, deliberate. On the third exhale, halfway through, her finger took up the trigger slack. The world narrowed. She stopped seeing the heat, the distance, the impossibility. She saw only the physics problem, the bullet's path, the mathematics of death. The Barrett roared, the massive recoil pushed back against her shoulder, but she maintained her position, eyes still on the scope. The bullet left the barrel at 853 meters per second, beginning its long arc across the valley. 1 second, the bullet dropped, wind pushing it right. 2 seconds, heat currents buffeted the round, but its massive weight carried it forward. 3 seconds, Maya held her breath. 3.8 seconds, through the scope, impossibly far away, she saw the window explode. The figure dropped. "Target down," Marcus confirmed, his voice tight with disbelief. "I can't believe you just." "Save it," Jake cut in. "Exfil now, move." The team was already moving, years of training taking over. Maya broke down the Barrett with practiced efficiency, securing it in her pack. They had 15 minutes before the compound erupted in chaos, before every hostile in the region converged on their position. They made it to the extraction point with 8 minutes to spare. disappearing into the Syrian desert like ghosts, leaving only one impossible shot and one dead terrorist as evidence they'd ever been there. The classified ceremony took place 6 weeks later in a windowless room at Fort Bragg. No press, no cameras, just 30 people who understood what Maya Reeves had done and what it meant. She stood at attention in her dress uniform, the blue cord of the infantry draped over her shoulder, as a 3-star general read from a citation that revealed nothing and everything. For extraordinary heroism in action against an armed enemy, under extreme conditions, precision and skill that prevented significant loss of life, Silver Star, Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves. The medal was pinned to her chest, cold metal that represented heat and distance and 4 seconds of flight time that changed everything. Jake stood in the audience, along with Dave Chen and the Delta operators from Kunar province, all of them knowing the full story behind those carefully vague words. After the ceremony, Maya found herself surrounded by operators who'd heard whispers of her shots, who wanted to shake her hand, to acknowledge what couldn't be publicly acknowledged, but she felt strangely empty. Another medal for a locked drawer, another secret added to her collection of invisible achievements. Staff Sergeant Reeves, a young woman, approached, nervous but determined. She wore the uniform of a newly minted second lieutenant. "I just wanted to say, I'm headed to Ranger School next month. Seeing you here, knowing what you've done, even if I can't know the details, it matters. You're proving it's possible." Maya felt something shift in her chest. She'd spent so long fighting her own battles that she'd forgotten others were watching, following the path she'd carved through sheer determination. Jake found her later on the parade ground, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant reds and oranges. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Hollow," she admitted. "Another classified commendation for work nobody can talk about. Sometimes I wonder if any of it matters." "It matters," Jake gestured back toward the building. "That lieutenant who spoke to you, she's one of dozens. The policies are changing, Maya, slowly, but they're changing. Every mission you complete, every shot you make, every skeptic you prove wrong, you're opening doors." "I'm tired of being a battering ram, Jake, tired of fighting just to be seen as equal." "I know," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "What if you didn't have to fight anymore? What if you could build instead?" That conversation led to Maya's new assignment 3 months later. She stood in front of the newly established Advanced Marksmanship Development Center, tasked with creating training protocols that would push the boundaries of long-range precision shooting. More importantly, she'd mentor the next generation of snipers, both men and women, who would benefit from the path she'd cleared. The first class arrived on a Monday morning, 20 students including 6 women, a number unthinkable just 5 years earlier. Maya watched them file onto the range, seeing echoes of her younger self in their determined expressions. One girl, a private named Sarah Chen, Dave's niece, Maya had learned, struggled with the Barrett during initial qualifications. Her grouping was scattered, her confidence shaken. Maya knelt beside her. "Breathe, the rifle doesn't care that you're nervous. Physics doesn't care that people are watching." She adjusted the girl's grip slightly. "You belong here, not because I say so, but because you earned it. Now prove it to yourself." Sarah settled in, found her rhythm, and placed 5 shots in a tight grouping at 800 meters. The smile on her face was pure joy. Jake visited the range that afternoon, watching from a distance as Maya worked with her students. She moved between shooters with patience and expertise, offering corrections and encouragement in equal measure. This was different from combat, from the lonely ridgelines and impossible shots. This was building something that would outlast her. "She's found her calling," Marcus observed, standing beside Jake. "No," Jake corrected, watching Maya laugh at something a student said, seeing genuine happiness in her expression for the first time. "She's become what she always should have been, not just a warrior, but a pathfinder." Maya glanced over, catching his eye. She nodded once, a silent acknowledgement between two people who journeyed from skepticism to respect to friendship. She'd stopped being just the woman who made impossible shots. She'd become the woman who proved those shots were possible, who opened doors, who ensured that the next generation wouldn't have to fight as hard for recognition. The sun set over the range as her students continued practicing, their shots echoing across the valley like promises of a future where skill mattered more than gender, where excellence spoke louder than prejudice. Maya Reeves had finally found something more powerful than any bullet: legacy. The end.